Yo. What up? I feel kind of like a rapper today. So, maybe just do the whole show. Just do the whole show like this. Be like, yeah. And them sneakers. Nah. What up, guys? Welcome to the Cards and Kicks podcast. I am Jacques Slade, and we got a very exciting show for you guys today. Some really cool things been happening. We had SEMA happen. We've had some news from Dom. We've got some new stuff from Jaguar or Jaguar, if you want to use the new logo. There's Jaguar from the new logo. That was terrible. I probably offended somebody. Either way, we got a really great show for you today. But before we get into that, let me give you guys a quick intro here. So I've been, Wicked comes out this week. So I've been in a bit of a, so it's been like a to-doom. I'm talking about cars and kicks. With my buddies, Erik and Nick. Now I could go into a full song, but I'm not going to because I don't want. You got to pay for the rest. But
I was waiting for the high note. I was waiting for that crescendo. I was waiting for that, man.
I don't know. I feel like we might have to do these intros not sitting, and like we have to, sitting across the screen for this kind of
performance.
We are going to secretly record a choreographed musical number for the new year. That is going to be what we work on.
I love the energy. Again, welcome to the show, everybody. I am Jacques Slade. I am the sneaker guy on this show, which probably doesn't make much sense because the other two guys, I am a bag of flour on their backs. I'm just taking a ride here, trying to find a place to go. Of course, I couldn't do the show without them, which is why I'm going to pass it over to Erik to give his intro.
Bag of flour number one. Wait, no, you're the bag of flour. I don't even know how that goes.
Yeah, I'm the bag of flour. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird thing. It's a weird concept, but let's just roll with it today.
Let's go. I'm Erik Valdez. I am more the car guy than the sneaker guy, though I like sneakers. And I guess that makes me the biggest part of the car is part of Cars and Kicks on the Cars and Kicks show. And to tie it all together, we got my man Nick.
Yeah, I don't know how I fit into that flower analogy either, but I'm the one that kind of is the dance on both sides of the aisle when it comes to Cars and Kicks, and excited for this episode because there's been a lot of interesting stuff happening.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let you guys lead off talking about SEMA, which is the big car industry show that happens. Is it Vegas every year? Is it always Vegas?
Yeah.
So it's never been like in LA or New York or anything like that. It's always Vegas.
I feel like their entire history has been, because they've been doing this, I don't remember how many years. We talked about this with RJ recently, but I feel like it's all been Vegas since day one. Yeah.
It's live in Vegas. Go ahead.
Yep.
Nick.
I was just going to say the crazy part about that is it led into Complex Con on the sneaker side, which then also leads into Formula One. It's like a month of Vegas activities, which, not that anyone, I don't know how anybody could survive like more than 3 nights in Vegas personally, but like more power to you if you're out there living there and living that life.
Yeah, I can imagine the Vegas locals are like super annoyed by this point. They're just like, "Oh my god, I can't wait for this week to be over. Send these people home."
Quick fun fact: while y'all were chatting about it, I fact checked this. No, actually, the SEMA show, the very first SEMA show, was held in the basement of Dodger Stadium.
Wow!
Oh wow!
And then it moved to the Anaheim Convention Center for a few years, and it's basically been in Vegas since I don't know, for a long time, but I did not know that. We all just learned something.
That is a cool fact.
That is
a cool fact. That's gonna be on a Jeopardy card one day.
Yep. And now we'll win $1,000.
Yes, yeah. SEMA history for 400. What is Dodger Stadium?
Right. The SEMA show was it was huge as always. The thing I love about the SEMA show the most is just, we talked a bit about this with RJ when he was on a few episodes ago. just the craziness of the builds that the people come out with. You know, a big part of the SEMA show is there for, you know, aftermarket manufacturers to showcase their new products. And it could be something as mundane as new windshield wiper technology or, you know, stuff like that. It's every little nut and bolt type of thing that can go on a vehicle. So not all of it is the glitz and glamour of the builds that we see, but that's the coolest part. So, you know, some of the technological advancements in, I guess, the wiper industry, for example, have come out of the SEMA show. They debut it there. But the builds are what everybody talks about, and they did not disappoint this year. I mean, just one of the coolest kind of, I guess, for the past decade or so of the show, the kind of go-to spot to find some of the dopest builds has been the Toyo Tires booth, their Tread Pass booth. Stan Chen, who I keep trying to get him on the pod. I think if he hears this, you know, you gotta just knuckle up, man. He's like, nobody wants to hear me talk. I was like, yeah, they do. Just, you know, who cares? And so anyway, he puts on a whole hell of a show there. Him, John's involved, a whole bunch of people involved in this Tread Pass thing, and they never disappoint. They kind of push the envelope in the design and the build quality of their vehicles. Stan's got a couple of his own vehicles that are in there or have been in there, and I mean, top-notch stuff too. It's really cool. So that was we'll talk. I guess there was a dope 300Z. Nick, what all did you see from that booth or from anything that kind of caught your eye?
I mean, I think one thing that to explain this for the sneakers before I get into that, like, this is like the level of this is like exponential to the size of a complex con or a sneaker con.
Yeah.
Like,
really?
This is like if you go to a sneaker con or a complex con for the sneakers, this is like, oh, we also have like aglet manufacturers. We have outsole manufacturers. We have, you know, cushioning technology manufacturers. We like, it's so big. You know, I think like you can't even really wrap your head around it until you've experienced it, because you could spend probably a full 3 days there and not see everything that's there. I personally like nerd out about the tools, like the tools that are released and like presented by the tool manufacturers at SEMA are always really fascinating to me. And I'm not somebody that's going to like a tool expo necessarily. So like to have it there with, don't put it past me though. I will. If somebody has a tool expo, let me know. I'll come check it out. But SEMA is like, it's like, to Eric's point, it's like the wiper blade technology, but it's also like, how did you mount those wiper blades to the car? How did you build the entire car? It's everything from the ground up and everything that it can be connected to it. So you have all this like racing stuff, you have the drift stuff, you have the off-road stuff. So for me, like I always default to like Honda stuff and import stuff. That's kind of my favorite scene. But like there's some beautiful lowriders this year that they don't get enough shine. But my absolute favorite thing that I saw on social was a couple of Honda Civics that were converted to electric by a company called Rywire Motorsports. They've done a ton of builds. You've probably seen them over the years if you're into Hondas, but essentially they took you know, like mid 90s, late 90s Hondas and swapped in electric, you know, fully electric. So like they've got one of them was basically like a daily driver concept. So it's you know, I can't remember where the motor's from, where the electric motor's from, but it's a front wheel, a front motor setup, you know, probably 70-mile range, something. But like the car looks like a completely stock 92, 93 Honda Civic hatchback, just completely done up, you know, like other than like loving the sound of cars, something like that, like, you know, they're working on a plug and play kit. I would imagine it's going to be fairly expensive, but that's the future for me. Like I'm thinking like, man, give me that setup and I don't need to take, you know, like an old Integra on a massive road trip like I have already in the past. It's fun, but I'm also old and like getting into a car that sits on the ground is already troubling enough for my back. So the other part of it is there was a second Civic that he built was an EK body, so like 96 and up, Civic hatchback, 96 to 2000, I should say. And it was a dual motor setup, front and rear. And this car is roughly 300, 320 something. They kind of imagine, kind of built like a track car. And to have, like, oh, the other cool thing about that, the first Civic was like, I think I read that it was like right around 2,000 pounds. So like, this is a car with the one had like a 300 horsepower with around 2,000 pounds. The other is like, maybe 600, can't even get the traction to keep the power to the ground. And the car weighs a little bit more, around the 30 or around 2,800 pounds. But like that power to weight ratio is something like we talked about the Lotuses at the Discount Tire event, a month or two back, right? Like it's a beautiful, if you can get over the electric motor aspect of it, like I think this is going to be something that you see a lot of people go towards.
Yeah, it's
so our
Go ahead, Jacques.
I was going to say I imagine people are pretty sensitive about the electrification of stuff like that. What is?
Oh yeah.
You posted.
You saw the Porsches, right?
Yeah, Jacques posted the Porsche. Which what was the? It wasn't blasphemy. What was the name of that? Sacrilege.
Sacrilege.
Which is like
Sacrilege.
The perfect name for something like that, because out of all vehicles to electrify, the 911 is probably the one that is going to get the most heat for going down that road. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? What is it about the updating of these cars? I mean, I guess it could be the same thing as sneakers. Like if they when they tried to do the Jordan 1, but they put zoom in it, and people were just like, I don't want zoom in my Jordan 1s, blah 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 blah.
It's very much that kind of mentality, where there's certain vehicles you just don't stray too far from. I'm not going to say you don't touch, like modify everything that you have. I've always been a big proponent for that. But when you take the flat six out of a 911 and put an electric motor in it, it's like pulling the heart out of a human being and putting in a microchip. It's like it's the one thing you just don't do. So like for me, I'm all about modernizing vehicles and even going outside of the box. For example, talking about the SEMA show and the Toyo Tread Pass booth, BC started years and years ago in the Honda world. He was drag racing Hondas. He set record after record in terms of, he was the first to get into the 10s and then like the 9s and 8s, and just became a huge name in the JDM import, specifically Honda world. Then he expanded into Porsches, built some crazy Porsches, etc. And a few years ago, he built an electric Porsche that got all sorts of flack and everything like that. This year, he brought an electric Rolls-Royce, an old school Rolls-Royce that was electrified, that was like slammed on like some dope wheels.
Sick.
It was that type of thing I'm all for, because the idea behind a Rolls-Royce is quiet, luxury, comfortable, all of these things, right? Whereas a Porsche, a big part of the experience is the sound. Like that iconic flat six sound is something I don't want to lose. I don't care if you give me 2,000 horsepower in a 911. If it doesn't sound like a 911, it's not going to work for me. And I know there's a lot of other people that kind of feel the same way. And there's been different people do different things. Talk about sacrilegious builds that aren't electric. I forget who did it, but there was a Cobra, 427 Cobra, which is one of the most iconic American cars, the Shelby Cobra. Also, probably the biggest kit car, replica car out there. There was one again in the Toyo booth that had an RB26, the ET, the Skyline motor in it. Yeah. So they took the traditional American V8, yanked that out, and put a turbocharged straight six in there, which is kind of like, whoa, okay, you're starting to get a little wild here. But I don't know, for some reason, things like that, they're cool. The electrification of certain vehicles is the biggest sticking point for me. Like even swapping an LS into a 911, I wouldn't do it. But if that's your thing, go for it, because there's still some sort of sound or something to it. Like people swapped LSs into Miatas, and to me, that's arguably a glow up, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's a whole other topic there with the swapping of powertrains and what is quote unquote acceptable and what is not in the car world.
Yeah, I think too, like, because there's a lot of there's a lot of swaps that happen that are like K-series swaps into Porsches, into Ferraris. People build something around an engine that they are comfortable with, or can get their hands on, or is reliable. Because when you look at Porsches are I think they are reliable, but they are not as reliable as like a K-series Honda or a Toyota Camry. What is that, a 4.8, the
4AG,
4AG. These are engines that are like, people will literally put 400,000 or 500,000 miles on a stock motor without ever rebuilding it. Like there's some appeal to those swaps that is interesting to me. I feel the same way as Erik. There's some cars that you don't touch, like, also at the same time, like, hey, if a car's been sitting and is going to the wreckers, like, I'd rather see it saved in some way, shape, or form, kind of. But it's kind of an interesting kind of dynamic where, like, we're moving more towards the electric stuff. We haven't, we talked about this a little bit with the Hyundai stuff, but like, until we get that feeling, and it's more than just the sound, right? It's the feeling, it's the rumble. Like you sit in a car and you feel the engine shake you. It's like, like, and it's not even like a shake. It's just like that tone. It's like, whatever that, you every once in a while I run into those things on Instagram where it's like, this is 852 hertz. Listen to this and you'll forget everything, kind of
frequency
thing. The frequencies thing. I feel like that's a lot of cars.
Yeah.
My personal feeling is, if it's not a special makeup, like if it's just a 911, I know that sounds blasphemous and people are like hanging up right now. They're like, I'm never listening to these guys again.
Never.
But if it's a GT3 RS, like, and I get that people go down their rabbit holes. I do that too, and be like, well, it's special because it's this, color and this options. But it's like, for me, on the Integra side, 92 GSRs, first B-Series Honda that we got in the United States, 1992. I'm not ever going to swap those if they have matching numbers. If the engine is original in that car, I can't get myself to customize it beyond a few things here and there. I feel the same way about like a Porsche, right? If it's a base model 911, if it's a base model Civic, if it's something that is like very entry level in terms of the brand's output, then to me that's kind of fair game. But once you get into those, like, oh, this is a rare spec, like, that to me feels like you're just asking for trouble. And I know some people build cars because of that. So
okay, all right, I get it. I feel like I would probably be the one I would get in trouble, because I'd be like, oh yeah, we can make that electric. Yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. Let's do it.
I mean, so on the sneaker side, this is an interesting thing though, right? Like you mentioned the Zoom Comfort Jordan 1s, right? They changed the exterior look of that shoe and added comfort. If you gave me any original Air Jordan model,
and there you're going with this,
exactly as the originals, and then put a bunch of comfort in it, I will pay more for that. I've said this for years. If you give me that and put like the most old man cushioning in that shoe that you can possibly create, you've got my money 2-3 times over what a regular pair is.
We're like this close to being sponsored by the Nike Monarch 4 at this point. You mentioned old man, bad back, all sorts of stuff. So
what's that? No, we're gonna get Dr. Scholes is on the phone right now. Hey guys.
No, Jacques, you need to go hang out with Robert Downey Jr. You've seen what he's doing with his RDJ dream cars, right? Like he's got a handful, an old vet and all sorts of stuff that, again, kind of sacrilegious swaps or whatever, but he's bringing new life to certain vehicles, everything. And look, it's cool. I get it. I just, there's a line that doesn't really need to be crossed sometimes. I think the 911 is that line. Again, we could go down this rabbit hole and we'll revisit this topic over and over again. But I think in the interest of kind of moving forward a bit, talking about some of these, the crazy builds, and putting your own touch on things. There was a reveal that just happened this past week. That was I've known about this for a couple of years, and to see it kind of come to fruition is crazy. And I'm talking about everybody is going nuts over this thing, but it's not a Jaguar, but it is a Jaguar XJS based vehicle called the TWR Supercat. This thing is bonkers. It's like a modernized wide body Jag XJS with a supercharged 660 horsepower V12 that sounds insane. This is the kind of pushing of the boundaries and modification of vehicles that I am here for. Have you guys seen this thing?
Yes, it's absolutely
amazing.
Gorgeous. Like this is an absolutely beautiful. It has enough of the future and enough of the past for me. Like it walks that fine line of like futuristic, but also like old school to make it like that's I could mess with this.
I agree 100%. Like just when you look at it, it's even, people, we talk about Singer on here quite a bit, and they do an amazing job with what they do with the 911. So does Gunther Works, etc. This is, to me, one of the kind of the best renditions that stay true to some of the theme of the original car, right? Because Jaguar it's a British car. British cars are notoriously quirky and have these little like bits that just separate them from any other country manufacturer in the world. And I think when you start looking at this car, like, even down to like the intake manifolds, they're like polished aluminum and it's not just all covered in carbon fiber. There is carbon here and there, but they stuck with like polished aluminum. And on the interior, it's like this rich, reddish, brownish leather everywhere that just feels like you're in a cigar bar in London somewhere.
Yes, that interior. That interior. Oh,
yeah.
So, Erik, let me ask you something.
Yes.
We're eventually going to get Mark Arsenal on.
We are.
He's people in the sneaker world would know him maybe from Nike or from Fat Lace, Illis, but like car people too. Like, he basically was one of the, not the person that brought RWB to the US, right?
Him and Brian Scotto are the two that brought theirs. Yeah.
So there was a lot of pushback on RWB over the last like year or so in terms of like, just the, it's obviously become pretty hyped in my opinion.
Sure.
For good reason. The guy does like incredible work. It's just done cool. Like it's art to me.
Yeah.
I also feel like, you're cutting up cars that might not need to be cut up, but there was, I forget who, I saw a YouTube video from somebody that just basically went into the story of RWB again to like kind of, talk about why it's important. And I can't remember who it was. And like, I think he said there was like between 15 and 20 RWBs at SEMA this year. And, I forget the gentleman's name off the top of my head right now, but the guy that does
Nakai-san.
Nakai-san, he built one at SEMA this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about that in regards to, because this kind of like, I feel like one thing that we always, as like sneaker heads and as like car guys and car enthusiasts, we don't have that direct line of passion for the brands that we're not super fans of, or the model of shoes that we're not super fans of. If you're like, I'm not a big Reebok Question fan. So like, it's a cool thing to see people, or see Reebok hack it up and make new versions of it and make takedown versions of it and expand the line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like on the car side, like, how do you feel about like a company like RWB or, an artist like Nakai? I don't know how you even describe that, but it feels like there's more, I'm assuming you have a little bit more of a personal opinion on that because it's Porsche versus this TWR Supercat is obviously crazy. And like, to your point, like so well done to see that interior. Like that's exactly what I thought when I saw it. I'm a big cigar smoker, but like I saw that and I was like, wow, like I'd like to be sitting in that with a cigar, like that's one of those kind of things that like the story and it captured all of those elements of what, like, I'm not necessarily a Jaguar fan. Like there's probably, a handful of them that I'd love to have or drive, but
yeah.
Outside of that, it's not something that's like near and dear to my heart in any way. Not that I don't appreciate them, but how do you look at that as like a Porsche fan?
First of all, I love old Jaguars. I've got a soft spot for them. So to see somebody take on that world is awesome, I think. But to get to your point about RWB or any other sort of like, for lack of a better term, I don't want to dilute his artistry by calling it a body kit, but people putting body kits on cars and everything like that. I think there's a difference in this. This may be a hot take. Some people may disagree with me, but I think there's a big difference in what you do to a car aesthetically versus what you do to its soul. Again, when you pull a flat six out of a car, it's yanking the heart out and replacing it, like I said, there with a microchip or something. The soul of the car is gone, in my opinion. When you throw a body kit on a car, or you have somebody like Nakai's son come and put his signature, his stamp on the vehicle, the bulk of that is aesthetics. Excuse me. So it's almost, in my opinion, it's almost like, do you opt to have the plastic surgery? Do you opt to have the hair transplant? Do you not? That's kind of like personal choice. And it's hard to knock people for going down that road. In my opinion, it's just, again, a form of self-expression, which is what we kind of talked about when we started this podcast. The crossover of cars and kicks and why those worlds merge is because both are forms of self-expression, in my opinion. So like in the sneaker world, if you went to Jacques' point, you went and you changed the silhouette of an iconic shoe like a Jordan 1 and put a different cushioning in it, and it looked totally different. Or you threw the fly knit on it, which they did, and I actually kind of like those. But you do, certain things like that, it starts to change it a bit. However, like if you start, taking paint markers and coloring the Nike swoosh whatever color you want it to, or putting fat laces in your shell toes or things like that, that's like the equivalent of the body kit on the car. And that's just kind of personal opinion. And it says something about who that person is. And, what that says is subjective. It's a way that people want to be noticed and say, hey, this is kind of my taste. And so that's a long-winded answer of saying that I think when you go an RWB route or a body kit route or something, I don't see as big of an issue with that as maybe some people do. From a purist standpoint, there are people that will look at that the same way as pulling a flat six out of a Porsche and putting an electric motor in it. It's touching something that was perfect from the factory. I get that to a certain extent, but I've always been a big proponent for making stuff your own. I've never bought vehicles to impress other people. I've bought them because I thought something about them was cool, and I've modified them to my own tastes. If other people happen to like it, great. If not, so be it. It's my thing. It's my form of self-expression. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So looking at the RWB stuff and looking at the Speedcat or what's it called? Speedcat?
It's a Supercat. I keep saying Speedcat because I'm thinking of the Puma.
Because of the Puma shoe,
racing shoe.
the Supercat. Is this something that Jaguar will be upset about?
Oh man, this opens up a whole other thing here. Jaguar has no right to be upset over anything at this point except their own rebrand. I think if they're smart, their whatever marketing team they've hired to redo this, to touch on that for those that aren't aware, Jaguar is in the middle of a complete midlife crisis makeover rebrand thing, so much so that they've stopped production of all cars at the moment, and they will relaunch in 2025 with, I think the initial vehicle is going to be like a big super sedan, which cool, that's amazing. But they're going about the whole campaign for the rebrand and the launch is just it's like trying to modernize something that didn't necessarily need to be modernized, if that makes any sense. Like from a technological standpoint, sure, but Jaguar, while it doesn't quite have the household cachet of, say, Porsche or even Mercedes or something like that, it is, for its entirety, been known as British luxury, you know?
Right.
And
Yep.
there's a certain element of British luxury that even as it modernizes, like people go to London and they still, you know, the touristy thing to do is to go look at, you know, the castles and to go look at the architecture, the old architecture stuff. Nobody's going to look at like the brand new modern glass building that is being built somewhere. That's not what people look for when they look to like British history, etc. So when you take a car company as iconic as Jaguar and you start completely rebranding it, it's I wouldn't want that task, number one, because that's a tricky thing to do, but I don't think they're going about it the right way. So to answer your question, if they're smart, they're going to look at something like this and they're going to go one of two ways. They're going to submit a cease and desist, like everybody seems to be doing these days when somebody does something, you know, with their silhouette and their IP, or they're going to latch onto that a bit and be like, oh, look, these guys remember that we were cool back in the day, and this is what their version of taking our coolness and modernizing it is. Maybe we can learn something from them. You know, that's my take on it. But yeah, man, it's Jaguar's in an interesting place.
I think that it always comes down to me, or for me, it always comes down to brands can never create culture. People and enthusiasts create culture. Right. So no matter what you do as a brand, I say this as someone who's worked on tons of things, trying to work with creative people outside of the brand to make a cultural moment happen. Mm-hmm. You can't. It's not something you can manufacture, no matter how hard you try. And I think with a company like Jaguar, you know, they've had their moments in racing where they've been like, you know, the XJ9R is like the old V12s
with the old prototype.
Yeah, the old prototype, which like those engines ended up in like a bunch of like custom, like, you know, streetcar, classic Jaguar streetcars for a while.
It was
there was like a lot of
XJR9. You had it pretty much right.
Yeah. That is like, to me, one of Jaguar's most important moments on the, you know, in their company history, outside of obviously, you know, any of those like, you know, movie moments that you can put something in, put somebody in a Jaguar and have that moment kind of carry on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, you know, Tupac's centerfold in All Eyes on Me, where he's in front of his Jaguar, like that to me is like, you know, but again, that's somebody that had nothing to do with the company, just loved the car and made it, you know, probably one of its most important photos in his body of work over time. And I think that's where like all of these things that happen where, you know, the brands like try to protect their IP ends up hurting them in the long run, because the people care about the people, you know, like we kind of saw a little of this. I guess I'll skip that, but there was some interesting stuff that happened at ComplexCon, I'll say, around like the back and forth of like people being critical of the releases and collabs that are coming out. But I think the other part of that, you know, to the Jaguar conversation, they need more help than they can get right now. Like they are not a company that is top of mind in the automotive world, in my opinion.
Not anymore, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for whether it's, you know, the Supercat, or, you know, whether it's, you know, somebody taking this new logo and like running it and like creating something cool. That's how they're going to actually get past the pushback from the changes, because they're trying to create something. They're trying to, you know, obviously kind of get back in the swing of things, so to speak. Yeah. And I think you always need people to take the baton from you and say, okay, I see where you're going with this. I'm going to make it cool for my people and my, you know, community, and tell my story with it. And I think that's the interesting piece of all of these conversations, and probably where we're going to head to with, you know, our conversation around the shoe surgeon.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, for example, one of the biggest things, aside from the logo itself and the rebrand there, is their I guess their piece of media that they released showed no cars. It's just a bunch of people standing around with some
models.
really colored backgrounds and stuff like that. And it's like, my opinion here, do the opposite. Show, if you don't want to show the vehicle or whatever, show, quick cuts, glimpses of the car here and there, the sounds, the this, the that. Show no people. The people, have nothing to do in this case with the rebrand of the vehicle itself. It'd be like launching, a new sneaker and never showing the sneaker, just showing somebody shooting hoops or playing basketball, but never even like showing a glimpse of the sneaker itself or the footwork or anything like that. It's like, what are you trying to sell here? Is Jaguar becoming a lifestyle brand? Are the cars going to be a thing of the past? Because that's kind of what it feels like right now, and that's not a good thing, in my opinion.
Is that? I mean, that's an interesting point. Are they just looking at Ferrari and thinking, well, Ferrari does all this stuff that's not cars, like we're going to do more non-car things and make money that way?
Yeah, it could be, but Ferrari as a whole, it's a different level. Like it'd be like, it's like every other computer manufacturer trying to market themselves like Apple. You can't. You can do your own thing, but when you try to replicate something else that's on a higher level, it's just, you look like you're trying too hard, basically.
It is an interesting luxury trend, though, right? Because like Porsche design has been a thing for 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there is some sort of cachet when you get to a certain level. I don't think Jaguar feels that way here in the States, the way they maybe once did, but I'm assuming they still have that cachet, overseas.
I don't know. I think they've lost a lot of it over time, and a big part of it is because they have a cult following, but their cult following is probably not a whole lot bigger than Saab's, for example. And there's people that are going to listen to this podcast and be like, "What is a Saab?" And that's the thing, is it's like there are people that are really into Jaguars, but you go to Cars and Coffee, you go to just whatever car gathering. And if somebody pulls up and let's say an old XJS, 90% of the people there that are even, car people for the most part, are going to walk by it and look at whatever else is parked next to it. There's a handful of people like me that'll stop and be like, "Oh man," and duck my head in and smell the Connolly leather and the wood grain.
Yeah.
Like there's that type of thing for people like me, but the vast majority of people, it just looks like an old 80s car. And they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I remember Jaguar," and that's you're in a bad position if that's where you're at. So yes, a rebrand is probably in line, but I don't know if they're going about it. I have ideas in my head as I'm talking about this. I had a little short film idea a while back that's popping back in my head that could be re-massaged into this. So I may have to figure out a way to reach out to Jag and be like, "Hey, let me help you with this rebrand."
Let's work on some things. It's interesting to me because I remember Jaguar from like the 90s and how it's just like this, like basically it was just like another luxury car. It was another one of those luxury cars, and this rebrand has caused so much like upheaval online. I mean, anytime a company rebrands, there's always a bunch of talk about it. Like people are still mad about the Kia rebrand. I still don't know what that logo means. Like they you know what I mean? I get it, but I think that the weird thing about this is like the woke backlash about it. Like that thing is I just don't understand. That's a whole different. We won't get into that here on the podcast because that's a whole conversation that we won't. We'll keep this to cars and kicks. But but I would say that the backlash to just the rebrand in general, it feels, based on the conversations that we've all had, it feels like a very car guy driven backlash. Like they don't want things to change. They want them to be what they were. They don't want you to upgrade like the engine. They don't want you to upgrade the logo. I thought the upgrade to the logo with a capital JU was their way of saying like it's really Jaguar. It's not just Jaguar. Like there's a Jaguar, like just to help dumb Americans say it right. But apparently
that logo to me feels like they're about to launch a new high-end refrigerator. That's what it looks like. It looks like an appliance.
I was thinking handbags, like,
or handbags.
I mean, here's the thing though. Like the interesting thing about it, like Erik kind of mentioned this, right? Like it's a I say a smaller group of enthusiasts that actually own Jaguars, right?
Right.
So the backlash is exponential to the number of people that actually own the cars.
Right.
Most of the people that are like super vocal about this probably will never even care to own a Jaguar.
Right.
And that to me is like part. Jaguar, if you're listening to this, like talk to Erik, like somebody that cares about the brand and has a little bit of interest in the history of the brand versus all the just like crazy like nonsense that comes out when this kind of stuff happens, because
all the clout chasing to me, folks like, on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah. It just feels like it's just overblown for no reason. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I love that original, like, logo. And like, I think like, to me, it just, the hood ornament pops into my head, it's like iconic to me.
Yeah.
But I understand also wanting to move to a new era, especially assuming that they're probably going to move towards electric vehicles in the future. Right. And like you're competing with a Rivian, a Lucid, brands that are levels up in the brand persona of luxury compared to what we have seen from Jaguar in the past. Maybe
here's a thought: what if this is all by design? What if their whole play here is to do something as polarizing as what's happening now and get everybody talking about your rebrand and how you're doing it wrong, etc., to then come out with the actual rebrand and be like, ha, got y'all talking, now you're top of mind, here's what we're really doing. That's like some evil genius stuff. So I don't know if that's what's happening, but that'd be a really interesting way to get yourself get yourself back in the mix conversation wise and make yourself relevant again. I don't know, just an out there Hail Mary kind of approach.
I mean, the CEO did say that it isn't done. So
That's true. That is true.
Maybe there's more to it that we don't know yet. But speaking of customizations and rebrands and all of that stuff, I did want to hop into the shoe surgeon stuff. So he responded to Nike. And really, it's interesting though, because a lot of the things that he talked about are all the things that I think we pretty much mentioned early on in the when the suit first happened from Nike. Like basically he's like, look, I'm using Nike products. The classes use Nike products. I'm just deconstructing and reconstructing them. Nothing that I'm doing is actually counterfeit. I'm buying Nike product and remaking them. And obviously Nike hasn't said anything about it yet. But Dom is he's pretty upset about it because he said, one, it's soiled his name in the industry, like making people think that he does fakes. And then the other part is that he's losing business. He's like, basically it's scaring away potential business partners and people from working with him because of the way Nike has phrased this and making it seem like he's doing things illegally, I guess, or
counterfeiting.
Yeah. Which, I guess, and this is all obviously goes back to a bigger IP conversation, but the fact that they were using him to do things up until 11 days before Nike legal team filed the suit, like literally,
which
11
is still
days
mind blowing to me. Yeah,
absolutely mind blowing. And so obviously, he's upset, rightly so. And his team finally filed the rebuttal to Nike. So we'll see where that goes. But it reminds me of all the stuff that you guys have, like of Singer and all these other companies and whoever did the Supercat, the TWR doing that Supercat, like all of those companies, and how those brands can really reply in a way that takes away from the culture that has been created by the community around them. Like I don't think Nike is going to win in this situation, regardless of how this suit ends up.
Yeah. An interesting thing that just happened overnight. I just remembered it now. Is are you guys familiar with the company Vintage Broncos?
Yes.
So we talked about them a little bit before. They're kind of like the Singer of Broncos. Initially, they were taking old 70s Broncos and leveling them up, making them modern, luxurious, etc. And they just a few months ago, they started taking brand new Broncos, rebodying them with old school bodies. So they're using Ford's new chassis, new power plants, new technology, and just doing that. Yeah, gave another option for their prospective clients. However, Ford just sued them as of yesterday for not the old school Broncos that they were redoing, but because they started utilizing new Broncos and completely rebranding them, so to speak. They've now been sued by Ford, and this is brand new information, so I don't have all the ins and outs of it just yet. But it is an interesting thing, where they went from modifying something old, etc., to basically utilizing a new Bronco platform and retroing it, so to speak, which is kind of what we've talked about before. I feel like Ford drew the line at that and said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're using our new stuff and doing this, and then you're selling it for like $300,000. Let's hold off on that for a minute and figure this out." So I'm gonna see. We'll have to follow the story and see how it all unravels, etc. But it's interesting. I don't know if they were doing. I feel like they were doing what Dom was doing and buying Broncos, and then doing this. So it's like if you've purchased this Bronco, or if somebody owns the Bronco and brings it to you as a donor, we're back in that same situation with the shoe surgeon and Nike. So we're seeing this happen more and more.
Yeah, I mean, we also just saw it with TJ Hunt and the Street Hunter body kits, right?
Yeah,
GTD kind of. So you may know a little bit more about this, Erik. I wonder, like, I understand that we're in a time where everybody's, trying to protect their IP. Totally understand it, right?
Yeah.
I fundamentally think that whether you're protecting billions and billions of dollars worth of IP or you're just starting out, it's better to just go have the conversations with people than to try to try to, bring a lawsuit against somebody that's doing something that has got some buzz. And the first thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about this is Carroll Shelby.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't Carroll Shelby basically build his cars off of Ford's platform from the very beginning? Like, weren't those original cars built with Ford engines and all of that stuff?
Yes, they were It was kind of a partnership with Ford for power plants, etc. But Shelby built the chassis. The chassis were not a Ford product, so it would be a lot like, I guess, not exactly apples to apples here, but an Indy car. Dallara makes the chassis and Honda provides the engine, so to speak. So they're branded Hondas for, and Chevys for marketing purposes. Nobody really knows much about Dallara, the chassis manufacturer. That's why you'll see a little sticker on the car. But when they're talking about who's racing and what they're racing for, it's Honda and Chevy. Nobody says it's the Dallara Honda or the Dallara Chevy or whatever. You know what I mean? So a similar situation back then to that, where the powertrain was used from a manufacturer, but it was in partnership with. So all was kind of cohesive and on the up and up.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think that's like the best example of this working, right? Him building those cars, him, like partnering with Ford. I think, I forget the AC Shelby, right? I forget what that stood for, but it was like a British manufacturer of the bodies, right? Originally.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's like where a lot of the, like the success of that turning into him building cars for Ford to compete at Le Mans is like why they should just talk to people first in a lot of ways, right? Like, especially to go back to the surgeon conversation, 11 days? Like, what? Like, come on. Like, like just get in a room and hash it out. Like, it's not that hard to be adults and figure out how to make this work for both parties, because it's super beneficial for both parties. Like,
yep.
I guarantee you that if Dom were to go looking at all the people who have gone through his surgeon academy over the years, you're probably talking thousands of people.
Yeah.
How many of those people have gone and bought dozens, if not hundreds, of Nikes to customize and sell on their own?
Yes.
Which Nike ultimately profits off of, and
right.
like brings new people in at every turn. And it just I understand the needing to protect your brand, but I also think that, like, man, your brands are so much more fragile, in my opinion, than people really, really understand.
Yeah.
Jaguar is a perfect example of that, right? Like, Jaguar has not been hot the way that they were back, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
And that is a brand that if you asked anybody in the 80s, that brand is never going to go away. They are a pinnacle brand out here.
Yeah.
And now it's like, what would you rather have? A Jaguar or a Genesis? Like, I'm probably going with the Genesis. I'm going with the Acura. I'm going with the, like, they're way down the list compared to where they once were. Not to say that they were going after like their, customizers or something back then, but like, I just think about those things over the long term and really kind of can't understand the reasoning for burning those bridges, because there's lots of sneaker brands out there that, maybe not have the cachet of the Jordan 1 as a customizable shoe, but I guarantee you, if trends shift any more than they have right now, where you've got New Balances and Saucony and all these brand and new brands, the EQLZs, like, who's to say that Dom just doesn't come in and make luxury basketball shoes?
That,
like, tons of people would pay for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with Jaguar. They've tried a couple different rebrands and technical partnerships, and Ford purchased them in the 90s. They tried to do their own thing, didn't really work. That was kind of the beginning of the end, in my opinion, for them. And then Tata, I believe, is still the parent company. And I like the Jags that have come out for the most part over the past decade or so. But I feel like the damage that had been done in the 90s and early 2000s is going to take a while to overcome. So, we'll see how that goes. But to your point with manufacturers being very sensitive about all this stuff and everything, I think it's valid. Again, it all goes back to the whole conversation of nobody is buying. First of all, if they are buying a Jordan 1, they may aspire to have Dom modify it for them. It's like the vintage Broncos story. Nobody is gonna be like, I could get a regular Bronco for $50,000, or you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and spend the other $250,000 and go get this vintage Broncos because it's kind of cooler looking. You know what I mean? It's like you're not detracting from them in any way, shape, or form. If anything, like you guys are saying, you're still purchasing a vehicle, a shoe, or whatever to then be modified. So they're still selling shoes and vehicles. So I don't quite understand what the whole deal is.
Yeah, unless vintage Bronco, I was gonna say, unless vintage Broncos is like, buy this vintage Ford Bronco from Ford, that we're a distributor of these Ford vintage Broncos. Unless that's the messaging, like, I honestly don't understand why this is a problem, especially if they're buying the Broncos and retrofitting them themselves. Like, what is, I mean, unless, I guess, maybe Ford has plans to do this themselves, which I doubt. I highly doubt Ford's going to be like, oh, yeah. We were told, so in this deck, as you can see, like, in 6 months, we were going to start doing vintage versions of our new Ford Bronco, and that's why we have a problem with this, which doesn't seem like that's likely based on the things that we've seen from Ford in the past and what they always seem to do. So it's for me, it just blows me away. It's the same thing with the Dom situation. It's like these are things that have already been bought And like, there's no way someone is going to mistake a $6,000 snakeskin alligator croc, whatever that Dom makes, with the $190 Jordan shoe that Nike sells. Like, I just don't get it. And there's no way no one's going to be like, oh, wait, Ford made a vintage Bronco, but it has updated specs. That doesn't sound like something they would do, but yeah. Oh wait, it's $500,000 or $250,000 or whatever it is. Nah, get out of here. Get out of here. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Yeah. And I like and what Farley? That's the CEO of Ford, right? Farley, right?
Yeah.
Farley. Yeah, he seems like a cool guy too. This is the thing that gets me. He seems like one of the cool.
He does. Ones. Yeah, there's more to it. I don't know. Like I said, it just got announced. When you hear this pod, it'll probably be 3-4 days old. The news, and maybe there will be some more info out about it. But as of now, it's kind of breaking, and we'll follow the story, and we'll recap like we did with Dom's story.
With Dom, we're gonna have to get like we had a sneaker legal. We're gonna get like a car legal guy on the show.
Yeah.
To explain it. Explain
seriously.
I mean, whenever Dom is actually able to talk more about this, we definitely need to have him on the show.
100%.
He's done a lot of cool stuff.
I'll hit him up and see what he's talking about. See if he feels like he can get on the podcast and talk. And see what he can. I'm sure he can't say a lot of things though. But anyway,
like the last thing I'll say about all this stuff, whether you're the customizer, the brand person, whether you're the anti-electric person, the electric person, the modify everything person, like, there's so much sand in the sandbox. Like, we don't need to be like going at each other. Like, the more the merrier. Let's just all have fun with this stuff, especially on the car side, because guess what? Like, the next generation doesn't care about this stuff the way a lot of people do now.
Right.
And the industry needs the energy way more than they ever have. And I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind. And hopefully, like, they can have conversations, and like, I would be down to talk to anybody in the industry about these things on this show or otherwise, to kind of help make these things a little bit more understandable across these kind of contentious points that we seem to be running into every couple of episodes.
I feel like we just need to launch the consulting arm of Cars and Kicks.
Kicks.
We have the podcast, and coming in 2025, the Cars and Kicks consulting firm. I think that's just what needs to happen. We'll get everybody on the right path.
There you go.
Let's do it.
All right, y'all. I think we're running up on our time here. This has been a good one. The recap conversations, all the other stuff here. It just opens up longer conversations that we'll revisit in the next podcast or the podcast after. We've had a couple of really dope guests here recently, working on a couple more. As we get towards the end of the year, maybe we'll get 1 or 2 more in before that, guests that is, and still working on really cool stuff for the new year already. I can't believe we're saying that, but it's almost Thanksgiving, which is insane. Yeah. So, I just I want to thank y'all. By the way, just full disclaimer here, we're all three hearing this static and pop in the latter half of this podcast here. So if you, the audience, hears it, we apologize. We do this basically live, and so we don't stop and like re-edit. So if you're hearing that and you stuck through the static, you are an OG, and we really appreciate it. But
we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll let y'all sign off, but we'll talk to y'all again soon. Nick, Jacques, y'all take it away with the wrap up.
Jacques Slade, aka Cousteau. You can find me on the internets or singing intros for this show, because that's my job basically. I'll pass it over to Nick.
Nick Engvall. You can find me also on the internets at Nick Engvall everywhere, and make sure you follow at Cars and Kicks Show, at Cars X Kick Show on Instagram, carsxkicks.com, and hit that subscribe button over on YouTube and help us get these views up so we can get this consultancy running in 2025.
Yes.
We appreciate y'all. We'll catch you on the next episode.
All right, y'all.
Peace.